It's time for some Week 12 waiver wire talk. Stick around all the way to the end. I'm joined by Dr. Vignesh Doraiswamy, who's going to be breaking down some of the most notable injuries from this last week in our rehab roundup. And we're going to be talking about at least 22 players, now an extra one with some breaking news in less than 20 minutes. Let's get started. I am Alfredo Brown here with Football Guys, host of the Pretend GM. And before we go any further, if you're watching on YouTube, just give us a quick like, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and drop your waiver wire questions in the comments below. And I'm going to do my best to get back to every single one of them. All right, we've got our Week 12 waiver wire targets, but before we go any further, we had some breaking news right before the show started. I had to whip up a graphic real quick because I am so excited. Just to put it as clean as I can for the families out there, is my desk, because I am so excited that Jameson Williams is practicing. There's no other analysis here. Just go and add Jameson Williams. Okay, he's a fantastic speculative ad. This is one of those players that can win you your league. We've been talking about him all year. This is the guy we've been waiting for. He's practicing. Vig, just from a medical standpoint, returning from the ACL, practicing does not mean that he is playing next week, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. He's so far out from his initial injury, though. He should be pretty darn good. We forget that this was the consensus number one wide receiver out of this extraordinarily talented class before his injury. In dynasty purposes, he should already be gone, but he truly could be otherworldly good when he comes back. The injury may hurt a little bit. It's hard to say. Will be outstanding next year for sure. I have no problems with him for next year, but for right now, practicing does not necessarily mean he'll be playing, but again, his talent is just incredible, and he is so far out from this injury that I think he will be pretty darn good.
All right, let's get to our second player here, and it's Christian Watson, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. Vig, talk to me about Christian Watson.
This is just getting really stupid. Everyone knows that Randy Moss meme of like the 3 touchdowns, 100 and whatever receptions, or 100 and whatever yards, 3 receptions. This guy has like 5 touchdowns on 8 receptions. But I think what we need to know, yes, he's touchdown dependent. Yes, his floor might be low, is that Aaron Rodgers loves the guy and seems to trust him. And that's what matters a lot. He's just out here like literally throwing out 50-50 bombs to Watson in the end zone, but he is coming down with it. So there is that trust that Rodgers has, plus the talent. And somehow the dude is still available in a ton of different leagues. I just picked him up this week in a couple of them. So yeah, Christian Watson, add him.
All right, the next guy here is Joshua Palmer. And remember, these are some high priority waiver ads, guys that are probably already rostered in your league. But you never know. Like, these are the players to go back and just double check on, because a lot of people dropped Josh Palmer before this week because of the news of Mike Williams returning, Keenan Allen returning, and people are like, oh, well, you know what? Let me open up some spots on my bench. And there was a lot of talk about him being dropped. So he was been the wide receiver 8 over the last 5 weeks. It's pretty incredible how good he's been. And a lot of it comes from this last game. Over the last 4 games, though, he's been averaging 7 receptions on 10 targets. He has been a target machine. Once again, we talk about this guy being able to play anywhere. Inside, outside, deep threat, short, everywhere. And Josh Palmer really has carved out a role for himself, especially now with Mike Williams re-aggravating that high ankle injury. Joshua Palmer, if he's available anywhere, needs to absolutely be a priority waiver ad for you.
Our next player is going to be Isiah Pacheco. Look, this guy was already doing really darn well. He was, back-to-back games. He's getting you 80-plus yards. But now with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and his little high ankle sprain, he's going to be out for a bit. And let's be honest, Jerick McKinnon is not the primary rusher. So Pacheco's been doing well. He's shown the team that they can rely on him a little bit. And with CH being out, those opportunities and touches will go to Pacheco, and he is still available in a mind-boggling number of leagues when I checked this morning, and absolutely should be a priority waiver wire ad if he is not already on a roster somewhere.
We're going to get to the deeper league waiver ads in just a moment, but these are the guys that it's just important to double check on. And it's Darius Slayton, wide receiver for the New York Giants. Wan'Dale Robinson is now out for the season with a torn ACL. We're not even going to talk about him in the rehab roundup because he's done for the year. Now, Darius Slayton, however, 4 straight games with 11 or more PPR points, and he's been a top 20 wide receiver on a points per game basis over the last 5 weeks. So those of you that are saying, I don't want the Giants wide receiver, he's probably not going to give me, listen, he's been top 20. Like that's exactly what you want. A guy that can start and be a wide receiver 2 for you every week. And that's what you can get potentially free out on your waiver wire. This is a guy, I think we've talked about him for like the last 3 weeks, but if he's there, please go and add Darius Slayton, because he's going to bring you that consistency now as the top target for the New York Giants.
Our next player is Donovan Peoples-Jones. And I know this poor guy has gotten a lot of crap from a lot of people because he's never really lived up to what we've seen him do, like in the preseason, let's say. But again, if we're looking on a points per game basis, someone who is really on the up and up, the guy's the wide receiver 26 over the last 5 weeks. He's a borderline fringe wide receiver 2 for someone who you could like throw in your flex spot, someone who's like still available again in a mind-boggling. I hate to keep using that word, but I check and there's like just he's available in so many different leagues. Donovan Peoples-Jones, another great person to sort of pick up. He's had 5 straight games with double-digit points, with 11 plus points per game, especially in PPR leagues. He is someone that I absolutely would try to, again, priority on the waiver wire.
We've got a giveaway that I want to tell you guys all about. It is a football autographed by the Denver Broncos running back himself. No, not Latavius Murray, not Melvin Gordon. It's Javonte Williams. All you have to do, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and send that screenshot to me over on Twitter at @thepretendgm. And that's it. You're entered to win. That is all it takes. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and you are entered to win the signed Javonte Williams football.
We talked about our high priority waiver wire ads. Now let's think about some of those mid-levels. We hear you, right? All those players we mentioned are probably not there in your leagues already. And we just want you to look to make sure they're, but who do you go after still? All right. The first player I want to talk about in this list, and you tell me what you think, Alfredo, is Treylon Burks. He's still available in a lot of leagues, and for good reason. The dude has barely played, he hasn't even got to like a 70% snap share anywhere yet. But what is he doing with that time he's on the field? He's been pretty efficient. He's really just running these very simple routes, some crossers, deep balls, and this sort of puts him in a spot to be that guy who could kind of get you some potentially easy PPR points. He has very, very high upside. We know this, but this is one of those things that if you get a good DB on him, he could get really shut down and he could, his floor could be truly, truly abysmal. But really there's who else is on that wide receiver core that really poses a threat to defenses. So, it's not like they're going to put their number one defensive back covering like Westbrook, right? So, Treylon Burks may be their target, but at the same time, we know the talent is there. We know that he's underperformed a little bit, but his snap share is increasing. The guy's been extraordinarily efficient.
Yeah, to me, Treylon Burks, he's got that high upside, like you said, Vig. The thing is that everything is still so simplistic for him. Had he been doing this with like a kind of a grander route tree and doing this on a little bit more consistent basis, better snap share, things like that, I'd be willing to be more secure about him and put him in that high level priority waiver wire ad. So right now he's still mid level, but I think that the potential is absolutely there. And we've seen guys like AJ Brown in the past be successful with Ryan Tannehill. Once again, not comparing Burks to AJ Brown, but saying that there is the potential there. We saw this past week, that he can get some of those deep passes and be able to catch the ball and run in a nice, effective manner. Let's get to our next player, and it is Samaje Perine, the running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. And what I want to do is, before everyone gets excited and spends all their fab on this player, let's put this into perspective. Vig, Joe Mixon is likely out just for 1 week. This is a concussion. We're not quite sure how it's going to go, but those typically average around 1 to 2 weeks at most. And the Bengals play the Titans who we just talked about, but they're 4th against fantasy running backs. This is not exactly a great matchup for a guy who's not exactly a great running back. He had 3 fluky receiving touchdowns, right? Like nobody, as you like to say, no one had that on their bingo card. Samaje Perine getting 3 receiving touchdowns. Okay. If you need a running back next week, and this is where we kind of have to put this in a vacuum. If you need a running back for week 12, then yes, he's potentially a top 24 running back based on volume. Not a great matchup, not uber talented. I wouldn't be blowing your fab on him, but if this is the win you need to get you into the playoffs, that's when you have to start making some business decisions.
Juwan Johnson is our next player we're going to talk about. This hybrid tight end wide receiver has been on like everyone's wish list as someone who needs to perform. We've been talking about Juwan Johnson.
You've been talking about him for like 2 years straight, like since we started this podcast. Because like the 3rd episode, and you were all over Juwan Johnson.
Well, he's finally doing, with Andy Dalton no less, finally doing what he was capable of. Like the physical talent was always there, right? He was like in the mold of that Darren Waller, a guy who could be the alpha tight end wide receiver player. And he's had 5 touchdowns in 5 games, which for tight ends is like really, really just stupidly incredible. And since week 6, he is 6th in receiving yards amongst tight ends. And next week, he's playing against San Francisco, best in the league against tight ends. And there's a bye week coming after in week 14. So again, not the player to blow all your fab on. I know he's available in a lot of leagues and for good reason. But if you are missing a tight end, and let's be honest, who isn't, right? The tight ends 2 and 3 were out hurt. He sounds like someone who's an absolute must add. And then depending on who else is on your squad, maybe a decent flex or your starting tight end play.
Nico Collins, wide receiver for the Houston Texans. Since coming back from injury 2 weeks ago, he's had a 27% target share, 31% air yard share, and 10 receptions on 17 targets over these last 2 weeks. So all those numbers sound super fancy, right? What they tell you is that Davis Mills is looking for Nico Collins. And he's not just looking for him on little short plays, but he's actually trying to get the ball to him downfield. Nico Collins has almost become a guy that he's just a threat to score a touchdown, the one touchdown that the Houston Texans scored that week. But he is that guy that's the threat to actually do it now. There's a very disgruntled Brandon Cooks there. And say what you want about some of those intangible things, but that kind of stuff matters when it comes to the chemistry between a quarterback and a wide receiver. That quarterback's a little less likely to look his way. Brandon Cooks likely not running these routes as best as he can. I know a lot of that is just the kind of conjecture, right? I'm just putting it out there into the ether. But Nico Collins just continues to show that he's been able to do it, man. And the Texans have a top 10 easiest remaining strength of schedule for fantasy wide receivers and some really easy opponents to mention over the next 4 weeks. My Miami Dolphins that can't cover anything, the Cleveland Browns, Kansas City Chiefs. So there's some potential here. I'm not saying it's a high flying Houston Texans offense, but there's potential here for Nico Collins to be a legitimate wide receiver 2 or 3 for your fantasy lineups going forward.
Demarcus Robinson. Okay, we talked about Samaje Perine being really fluky, and I know that's where your mind first goes when you hear Samaje Robinson, but over the last 3 games, he is averaging about 5 receptions on 7 targets. He's sort of sliding into that whatever we were hoping Rashad Bateman would kind of be as a floor, and he sort of slid into that role. And then look at who they're playing next. They're playing my Jacksonville Jaguars, out behind me, and Pittsburgh. 2 pretty easy matchups in the next 3 weeks, and then plays Pittsburgh again and Atlanta sort of in the final 2 weeks of the season, leading to, a relatively easy matchup for a guy who's like positioning himself to be one of the top wide receivers on a pretty good offense. So he gives you that low end wide receiver 3 sort of flex floor. And let's be honest, this is how you win your league towards the end of the year, right? You have these guys that you're otherwise starting who get you like maybe 20 points, but more often than not get you 3 to 4, maybe 5 points. And Demarcus Robinson just elevates that floor and kind of gives you some pretty decent upside there. So another player to try to potentially scoop up for you.
Let's get to our first guy here, the deeper league ads. We listened to the people, and the first one's Terrace Marshall, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. If he's already rostered in your league, just don't just go at me in the comments. Whatever, man. I don't care. Terrace Marshall, 6 targets per game over the last few games here. He's become a real deep threat for the Carolina Panthers. 70% air yards share last week in week 11. That was the most in the NFL. So now that Baker Mayfield is in there, and who knows how long he'll be the starting quarterback, but Terrace Marshall has been a guy that's kind of come into his own ever since, the trade of Robbie Anderson, and he's had 10 or more PPR points in 3 of his last 4 games. So yeah, it's a little bit of a deeper ad, and I don't know how comfortable you'll be starting him, but he's a guy that's worth rostering.
You think Terrace Marshall's deep? Let me give you Quez Watkins. So the last couple of weeks, this guy's gotten you 10 or more PPR points, and it sort of coincides with an expansion of his role with Dallas Goedert being out. Again, nothing mind-blowing, not saying he's going to blow you away, but we're seeing sort of, early trends indicative of this guy being a double-digit sort of PPR guy, potentially week in and week out, which is a pretty decent floor. And, throw a touchdown or something in there on top of that, and this is someone who gets you that 15, 16 sort of points. So, again, he's available in like 80-something% of leagues when I check. So Quez Watkins might be a good deeper league ad.
Handcuff your running backs, man. It is that time of year. Isaiah Spiller, running back for the Los Angeles Chargers. This past week, he more than doubled Sony Michel's snap count, 6 opportunities on 16 snaps. I know those numbers don't exactly blow your skirt up, but he's got no standalone value. I get that. But what he is a handcuff to Austin Eckler. If anything were to happen where Austin Eckler misses even just 1 game, it's going to be really good for you to have Isaiah Spiller. He's a guy that's going to get those goal line touches, the receiving work. He had that prowess in college. This is a guy to make sure that you have stashed if you have Austin Eckler on your roster.
What was this blow your skirt up? That was like the dumbest thing I've heard you say.
Well, you can't see what I'm wearing in this angle
my bad.
camera,
okay, so. That's fair. Okay, that's fair.
You have no idea how I dress when we record.
Yes, this is very true. I've never thought of numbers.
It's very breezy.
Someone's skirt. Very breezy.
Super comfy, man.
All right. But Keaontay Ingram, back up to James Conner. Ed Poras, someone we love, great Twitter follow, great for like injuries and other stuff. He wrote on Twitter about how in week 10, Conner played 96% of snaps. But over the last 4 years, Conner has missed 4 or more games when getting just 60% of the snaps. Again, we're talking about this being handcuff season. We're talking about someone who, if you're the James Conner manager in your league, Keaontay Ingram probably still available, maybe a good person again to pick up, because if you have Conner, you've been sort of relying on him a little bit, and you don't want to be relying on him going into the playoffs if he potentially picks up an injury. So make sure you have good handcuffs for your primary running backs.
Hot damn, Fig, it's time for the Week 12 Rehab Roundup. Now listen, we ain't smart like you. We don't need all that medical jargon, but we just want to know, when are our players going to be back? Now, first player we're going to take a look at is Running Joe Mixon. Yes, that's what they call him, Running Joe Mixon. Talk to me about Running Joe.
He got a concussion. He'll be in the league's concussion protocol. Obviously, we've seen a lot of attention being given to concussion protocols this season, and for good reason, but he's almost certainly going to miss week 12. Whether or not he also misses week 13 will be a little up in the air. Obviously, if he's ready to play, you're going to start him, but this is more so keep a close eye on the Samaje Perine situation.
Now we got another player. He thought he was coming back, but he ain't ready to be back in the saddle just yet. It's Mike Williams, re-aggravating that high ankle sprain.
The Mike Williams story here is really going to be about Josh Palmer. We talked about back when we talked about the injury the first time, how, high risk of re-aggravation. You got to take it slow, be ginger about it. But Mike Williams probably out week 12, 13, at least, maybe even into week 14, and high risk for re-aggravation. I know that's really frustrating for managers rostering him, but obviously you got to keep him on your roster, because if he comes back towards the end for your playoffs and your championship, he has high potential, but not feeling very high on him for the next few weeks.
Now, the quarterback of the Bears, Justin Fields, that is a man who can run. Thank God his legs are okay, but he done hurt his non-throwing shoulder. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, and I think the key there is that this is his non-throwing shoulder. It sounds like it's he's either sprained or maybe even had a stinger. It's hard to know exactly. Details to come. Look out for what the inevitable imaging shows. But there is potential for him to be out for the next couple of weeks. So those are games against the Jets and Packers, and that might affect what you're planning on doing with your Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet sort of situation. They do have a bye week after that. So pay close attention to this. Again, we know that he brings value with his rushing and his feet, and it is his non-throwing shoulder, so he should still overall be okay. But this is something that I would say is still a little up in the air. Pay close attention. In one quarterback leagues, if Fields has been your guy, you might want to pick up someone else as a potential backup for you.
Hey everybody, Alfredo here. I just wanted to take a moment really quick to let you know that as we were recording this, some news broke about Kyle Pitts that he's believed to have suffered a torn MCL that will require surgery. With that, it means he'll probably be out for the rest of the year. So we did not know that while recording, so we took out the part here about Kyle Pitts. We're just going to skip past that, go to our next player, as Vig did believe initially that it was going to be a sprained MCL. So we're going to move on to our next player here during the rehab roundup. Vig, we got hamstrings everywhere. And from what you've done told me, these hamstring injuries, well, they linger. So I'm going to ask you some quick questions on some players. Keep them or cut them? Kyler Murray. That's right. I just blew your skirt up.
Honestly, man, I don't know. Cut Kyler Murray. He's not going to play tonight on Monday Night Football, which is when we're recording this. He's got a really horrifying strength of schedule moving forward, and has a bye week next week in week 13. I don't know. I feel like there are going to be other healthy quarterbacks, especially in one quarterback leagues. This is for one. You obviously don't cut Kyler in a super flex league and then jump at us for saying that later. But there are other healthier quarterbacks who I think can get you into the playoffs and beyond at this point. Kyler, I'm just not very high on him at the moment.
What about Kadarius Toney?
Oh man, this is really sad given how well he looked and his little hopping into the end zone against the Jags last week. But again, this is a player that has had hamstring issues forever and ever. I can't imagine him on the squad that he's on having a significant role. I would not rely on Kadarius Toney. I would keep him because the talent's there. But if you need to cut someone, depending on who else is on your roster, he's a very valid cut target, I would say.
Now, here's a guy that started to take some work from Najee Harris, and it's Jaylen Warren, running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Keeper cut.
Oh, man, this is tough. Again, running back, I would say, it's hard to find good value. And, we talked about this being handcuff season. I think Jaylen Warren is someone I keep just because, again, depending on what happens with Najee, you never know. I would keep him, probably not expect much out of him for the next week or so, but depending on what this ends up being, it didn't look too crazy. So he might be back for us.
I think I need a hat. I think that's what's going to totally complete the look for the rehab roundup. But
I quit if you have a hat.
No, absolutely
like Marlboro Man mustache. I quit.
I'm going to put that to the test, and I will be back next week with a hat. Thank you so much, guys. That's it for us. We'll see you on Wednesday as we talk about our final trade deadline targets with Dave Kluge for Week 12. Adios.